Clara Evans was still holding the medicine tray when Nico Salvatore's mother destroyed her in front of 20 people. The dining room looked like something stolen from an old European palace. Crystal chandeliers hung above a table long enough to seat a royal bloodline. Candles burned in gold holders. Rain crawled down the tall windows behind them, turning the gardens outside into black glass. Every person at the table wore silk, diamonds, tailored suits, and the kind of cold expressions Clara had only seen in hospital waiting rooms when rich families were deciding who would inherit what. She stood near the wall in her simple navy nurse's dress, her brown hair pinned back, her shoes still damp from the storm outside. She had come downstairs only to remind Mrs. Salvatore to take her heart medication. She had not expected to become the evening's entertainment. Serafina Salvatore sat at the head of the table like a queen who had survived too many wars to fear God. She was beautiful in a severe, fading way, with silver hair swept into a perfect knot and diamonds at her throat. Illness had thinned her face, but it had not softened her eyes. Across from her sat Isabella Caruso, Nico's fiancée. Isabella looked carved out of money. Sleek black dress, ruby earrings, red lips tilted into a smile that was not quite human. Clara kept her voice low. Mrs. Salvatore, your medication is due. A few men stopped talking. Someone laughed quietly. Serafina did not reach for the glass of water. Instead, she looked Clara up and down. Do you always interrupt private family dinners? She asked. Or only when you forget your place? Clara felt heat rise in her face. But she held the tray steady. Your doctor asked that this be taken at 8. How charming. Serafina leaned back. A plain little nurse who thinks a prescription gives her authority. Isabella's smile widened. Clara swallowed. I can leave it here. No, Serafina said sharply. You can stand there and listen. Since you seem so eager to be included. The room went quiet. Clara should have turned around. She should have placed the medication down, walked back upstairs, and reminded herself that private nursing paid better than hospital shifts, that her rent was late, that her younger brother still needed help with his tuition. That pride did not keep the lights on, but her feet would not move. Serafina's gaze slid toward Isabella, then back to Clara. You see, Miss Evans, some women mistake proximity for importance. They enter a house like this, touch expensive sheets, pour medicine into crystal glasses, hear men speaking in low voices, and begin to imagine they belong. Clara's fingers tightened around the tray. Isabella gave a soft laugh. It happens all the time. Staff gets confused. Serafina lifted her chin. But you are not family. You are not a guest. You are not a woman a man like my son would ever look at twice. The words struck harder than Clara expected. Not because she believed Nico Salvatore would look at her. He was a name whispered in hospitals, police stations, courtrooms, and restaurants where men lowered their voices when he entered. She had seen him only 3 times since accepting the private nursing position in his Hudson Valley mansion. The first time, he had come home after midnight with blood on one cuff and a bullet graze across his ribs, refusing anesthesia while Clara stitched him because pain keeps a man honest. The second time, he had stood outside his mother's bedroom and watched Clara argue with a senior doctor twice her age until the doctor admitted the dosage was wrong. The third time, he had caught Clara in the library at dawn, crying quietly over a phone call from her landlord. He had not comforted her. He had only placed a black coffee beside her and said, "Crying makes enemies curious. Don't give them the satisfaction." Then he had walked away. No, Clara did not imagine Nico Salvatore cared about her. But being told she was invisible in a room full of people still hurt. Serafina's voice grew colder. You are too plain for our family. Too soft. Too ordinary. This world would swallow you before breakfast. A fork touched porcelain somewhere down the table. Isabella tilted her head. Eyes sparkling. Poor thing. She looks like she might cry. Clara forced herself to breathe. I'm not crying, she said. That made the room still. Serafina's eyes sharpened. Excuse me, Clara lowered the tray to the sideboard with careful hands. I said I'm not crying. I came here to give you medication that may keep you alive through the night. You can insult my clothes, my voice, or my place in this house. But you will take this pill. Because unlike everyone smiling at this table, I am not here waiting for you to die. The silence became dangerous. One of the older men at the table stopped breathing for a second. Isabella's smile disappeared. Serafina's face went pale with fury. Then the dining room doors opened. Nico Salvatore walked in. He wore a black suit soaked at the shoulders from rain. His dark hair damp, his jaw shadowed, and a thin cut split across one knuckle. Two bodyguards entered behind him and stopped near the wall. The storm outside flashed white through the windows. And for one breath, Clara saw him clearly. Not handsome in a safe way. Handsome, like a locked door in a burning building. His eyes moved once around the room. They passed over the men, over the wine, over his mother's rigid face, over Isabella waiting beside the empty chair saved for him. Then they landed on Clara. No one spoke. Nico removed his wet gloves finger by finger. What did I miss? He asked softly. Isabella recovered first. Nothing worth discussing. Darling, your mother was only reminding Miss Evans that family dinners are private. Nico did not look at Isabella. His mother said, Your nurse forgot herself. No, Nico said. My nurse appears to be the only person in this room who remembered why she was hired. The room froze. Clara's pulse kicked. Serafina's mouth tightened. Nico. He walked forward. Isabella shifted, expecting him to come to her. She placed one elegant hand on the chair beside her. A silent claim in front of everyone. Nico walked past her. Not around her. Past her. He stopped beside Clara at the far end of the table. Then he pulled out the chair next to her. The sound of wood scraping against marble echoed like a gun being cocked. Sit, he said. Clara stared at him. Mr. Salvatore Nico. He corrected. His voice calm enough to frighten everyone but her. I'm working. You reshaking. I'm angry. His eyes flickered. Not amusement. Not softness. Something darker. Interest. Then sit before you drop the tray and give my cousins a story they'll repeat badly. Against every instinct. Clara sat. Nico sat beside her. At the family table, before his fiancée, before his mother, before men who had killed for less disrespect, he reached for the glass of water, took the pill from the small paper cup, and placed both in front of his mother. Take it, he said. Serafina stared at him as if he had slapped her. You would embarrass your fiancé for a nurse, Nico leaned back. One arm resting behind Clara's chair, not touching her. Almost. I did not embarrass Isabella, he said. She managed that alone by laughing. Isabella's face flushed. Clara felt the entire table looking at her. And, for the first time since arriving in the Salvatore mansion, she understood something terrifying. Nico had not rescued her because he was kind. He had chosen her because choosing her cost someone else power. And now, every person in that room wanted to know why. So did Clara. The answer began 3 nights earlier. When she first saw Nico bleed, Clara had been hired through a private medical agency that never used last names over the phone. The offer was strange. 3 weeks of live-in care. Double pay. No photos. No questions about visitors. No posting anything online. The patient was an elderly woman recovering from a cardiac event. Clara almost refused. Then her landlord taped a final notice to her apartment door. So she packed 2 uniforms, one pair of black flats, and the small silver cross her grandmother had given her, and got into the black SUV waiting under the elevated tracks in Queens. The Salvatore mansion stood behind iron gates in the Hudson Valley, half hidden by pines and rain. It had a private clinic in the East Wing, a chapel behind the gardens, and cameras tucked into every corner like watchful eyes. The house manager, Renata, gave Clara a room on the 3rd floor and 3 rules. Never enter the West Corridor after midnight. Never answer a phone that isn't yours. And if Mr. Salvatore tells you to leave a room, leave before you understand why, Clara asked. And Mrs. Salvatore Renata's expression changed. Do not let her make you hate yourself. She does that when she is afraid. That first night, Clara checked Serafina's blood pressure, adjusted the oxygen monitor, and listened to the old woman pretend not to be in pain. You're young, Serafina said. 29. That is young when every room you enter has men with guns. Clara glanced at the 2 bodyguards outside the door. I work in emergency medicine. Guns don't impress me. Serafina looked at her for the first time. They should. Before Clara could answer, shouting erupted downstairs. A door slammed. Its heavy footsteps crossed marble. Renata appeared in the bedroom doorway. Pal. 8. Miss Evans. Bring your kit. Clara followed her down the West Corridor after midnight. Breaking rule number 1 before the first day ended. Nico Salvatore was sitting shirtless in the library, surrounded by 3 men with guns and 1 doctor who looked too scared to touch him. Blood ran down Nico's side, dark against his skin. Tattoos covered his chest and shoulders. Black ink disappearing beneath muscle and fresh bruises. He looked up when Clara entered. Who is she? The nurse, Renata said. I asked for a surgeon. The surgeon fainted. The frightened doctor whispered. I did not faint. Nico's eyes stayed on Clara. Can you stitch? Yes. Have you stitched a bullet graze? Yes. Have you stitched one? While men argued about killing each other, Clara opened her kit. No. But I've stitched a drunk groom while his bride threw shoes at him. So, I am flexible. For the first time, one of Nico's men almost smiled. Nico did not. He watched Clara wash her hands, watched her put on gloves, watched her kneel in front of him without lowering her eyes. When she cleaned the wound, his jaw tightened, but he made no sound. You're not afraid, he said. I'm busy. That isn't an answer. It's the only one you're getting until you stop bleeding on a Persian rug. His gaze changed then. Not warm. Never warm. But sharpened. As if she had become a problem worth remembering. When Clara finished, he caught her wrist before she could stand. Every gun in the room seemed to become part of the silence. His fingers were hot around her pulse. You saw nothing tonight, he said. Clara looked down at his hand, then back at his face. I saw a man who needs antibiotics, rest, and possibly therapy. Someone coughed. Nico's mouth barely moved. Almost a smile. Almost. Careful. Miss Evans. I usually am. He released her slowly. But from that night on, Nico noticed things. He noticed that Clara touched his mother's shoulder before taking her blood pressure, so Serafina would not startle awake. He noticed she watered the dying basil plant in the kitchen window. He noticed she gave firm orders in a soft voice, which made arrogant men lean closer and then obey before realizing they had done it. He noticed her shoes were cheap, polished carefully, and worn thin at the heels. Clara noticed him noticing. and she hated how aware she became of his presence. Nico moved through the mansion like weather. People adjusted before he entered. Conversations died. Men stood straighter. Women lowered their lashes or sharpened their smiles. He rarely raised his voice because he never needed to. The house was full of portraits of dead Salvatores, but Nico seemed more haunted than any of them. Sometimes Clara saw him in the hallway outside his mother's room, watching through the cracked door while Serafina slept. His face in those moments was not soft, but stripped down. Like a man guarding the last piece of a life he refused to admit he still loved. Then he would see Clara, and the armor returned. "You should sleep," she told him once. "So should you. I'm paid not to." I'm not. Then you were just stubborn for free." His eyes moved over her face. "You talk to all your employers like this, only the ones who bleed on furniture." He stepped closer, and the hallway seemed to shrink. "Do I frighten you?" Clara. It was the first time he used her first name. She should have lied. Instead, she said, "Yes." Something unreadable passed through his eyes. "Good," he said. Then, after a pause, "Quieter, but not enough to make you stupid." She did not know what that meant. She would. After the dinner, everything changed. Nico, sitting beside Clara, was not a romantic gesture. It was a declaration of war disguised as manners. By morning, the staff avoided her eyes. Bodyguards opened doors for her too quickly. Renata warned her not to walk in the gardens alone. Serafina refused to speak during her morning examination. Isabella arrived before noon in a cream coat and diamonds. Carrying a smile sharp enough to cut silk, she found Clara in the upstairs sitting room, organizing medication. "You must feel very special," Isabella said. Clara did not look up. "I feel understaffed." Isabella laughed softly. Nico likes unusual things. For a while, Clara placed a bottle into the locked box. Then you have nothing to worry about. You think because he sat beside you, he chose you. Clara finally looked at her. "No, I think because he sat beside me. You were angry enough to have this conversation with the nurse." Isabella's smile thinned. "You don't understand men like Nico. I understand vital signs. His are stable. Yours seem elevated." Isabella stepped close enough for Clara to smell her perfume. "Listen carefully. You are a distraction. A bruise on an otherwise beautiful arrangement. Nico and I will marry because families like ours don't ask permission from feelings. He may stare at you for a week. He may even touch your hand if you look wounded enough. But he will never ruin an empire over a woman who buys her dresses off a clearance rack." Clara's stomach twisted, but she kept her face still. Before she could answer, Nico's voice came from the doorway. "You spend a lot of time studying her clothes." Isabella turned. Instantly graceful. "Nico." He stood with one hand in his pocket, eyes colder than the rain against the windows. "I was inviting Clara to lunch," Isabella said. "No. You were threatening her badly." Clara exhaled. "I don't need you need to stop pretending. Insults don't leave marks," Nico said, without looking away from Isabella. That silenced her. Isabella's face hardened. "Careful. Darling, people are beginning to talk. Let them. About her. About me. About me. About me," Nico said. "They know better than to talk about her." The words landed between them like a knife. Clara felt her pulse climb. Isabella looked from Nico to Clara, and something ugly flickered beneath her beauty. "You're making a mistake." Nico stepped into the room. "No," he said. "I'm waiting to see who becomes desperate because of it." Only later did Clara understand. Nico had not chosen her only to defend her. He had chosen her to provoke the snake hidden inside his house. That night, Clara's apartment in Queens was broken into. She was not there. She was in the mansion, sitting in a guest room she had not asked for, arguing with Nico while rain battered the windows. "You moved me without asking," she said. Nico stood near the fireplace. Jacket off. Sleeves rolled to his forearms. "Someone searched your apartment at 9:14 p.m. Clara went cold. "What? My men were watching the building." "You had men watching my building?" "Yes." "Since when?" "Since dinner." She stared at him. "That is not protection. That is surveillance. That is the reason you were alive." "You don't know that." "I know the man who entered your apartment had a knife and left angry." The room tilted slightly. Clara gripped the back of a chair. "My brother sometimes stays there. He was at campus. I checked." "You check my brother?" "I check everything that can be used against someone under my roof." "I am not under your roof by choice." "No," Nico said. "You re under it because someone has decided you matter." His voice was calm. That made it worse. Clara stepped closer to him, anger burning through fear. "I mattered before you noticed me." Nico went still. For a moment. The only sound was rain. Then he said, "Yes." One word. No defense. No arrogance. It unsettled her more than any argument would have. Clara looked away first. "Why would anyone come after me? Because my mother insulted you." I contradicted her. "And Isabella threatened you. That puts you in the center of a table where everyone is holding knives under the cloth. I didn't ask to be at your table. No one ever does." His eyes lowered briefly to her mouth, then returned to her eyes so quickly she wondered if she had imagined it. She had not. The air between them changed. A dangerous, quiet pull. Clara took one step back. Nico noticed. Of course he did. "Your room has guards outside," he said. "No cameras inside. I'm a criminal." Clara. Not a coward. You say that like it's reassuring. It's accurate. She almost laughed. But fear caught it. Nico moved toward the door, then stopped. "Lock it after I leave. There are guards outside. Lock it anyway." "Do you think your own men can't be trusted?" He looked at her over his shoulder. "I think trust is what gets people buried." Then he left. Clara locked the door. She did not sleep. At 2:00 m. She heard a child crying. At first, she thought the sound belonged to a dream. A small sob beyond the wall. Muffled. Then silence. Clara sat up in the dark. Heart pounding. The mansion was too large. Too old. Full of pipes and wind and secrets. Then she heard it again. She opened her door. The guard outside turned immediately. "Miss Evans, you need to stay in your room. There's a child crying." His expression changed. Not confusion. Alarm. "Go back inside." Clara looked down the hallway. At the far end, a narrow door stood ajar. Warm light leaking through. Another sob. Clara moved before the guard could stop her. Inside was a small nursery hidden behind a bookshelf. A little girl sat on the floor. No older than 5. Clutching a stuffed rabbit with one button eye. She had dark curls, tear-streaked cheeks, and a fever flush. Clara knelt instantly. "Hi. Sweetheart, I'm Clara." The girl stared at her. Behind Clara, the guard cursed under his breath. Then Nico appeared. His face was lethal. "What happened?" The guard lowered his head. "She woke up asking for you." Nico stepped into the nursery, and the little girl ran to him. He caught her carefully, one large hand cradling the back of her head. The sight hit Clara in the chest so hard she almost looked away. Nico Salvatore, feared by men twice his age, held a feverish child like she was made of glass. Lucia, He murmured in Italian. "You're safe." Clara rose slowly. "She has a fever." Nico's eyes met hers. For the first time since she had known him, something like fear lived there. "Can you help her?" The question was quiet. "Not in order." Clara nodded. "Yes." Lucia was not his daughter. Not exactly. Clara learned the truth while cooling the child's fever with damp cloths and measuring medicine by lamplight. Lucia was the daughter of Nico's younger cousin, murdered 6 months earlier during a truce meeting that became an ambush. Nico had hidden the child in the mansion because the men who killed her parents wanted the Salvatore bloodline erased. Officially, Lucia had died with them. Unofficially, she slept behind a hidden bookshelf with 2 guards outside and nightmares no child deserved. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" Clara asked. Nico stood near the crib, his arms crossed. "The fewer people who know she breathes, the longer she keeps doing it. Your mother knows, yes." Isabella, his jaw tightened. "No." That answer mattered. Clara smoothed Lucia's curls as the child slept. "She needs sunlight. School. Other children. She needs to survive. She needs both." Nico looked at her. For once, Clara did not soften her voice. "You can protect her by turning her childhood into a prison." A muscle moved in his jaw. "You think I don't know that? I think knowing something and doing something about it are different things." He moved closer. Stopping on the opposite side of the crib, "You're very brave when a child is involved. I'm very brave when adults are being stupid." His eyes held hers over the sleeping child. The room felt too small. He reached across the crib. Not for Clara, but for the blanket near her hand. His fingers brushed hers. Barely. Still, her breath caught. Nico's gaze dropped to their hands. He withdrew first. The restraint was worse than touch. "Go to bed," he said. Clara whispered. "You say that when you're afraid of what happens if I stay." His eyes lifted. For a second, she thought he might deny it. Instead, he said, "Yes." Then he walked out. The next morning, Serafina finally spoke to Clara. "You found Lucia?" Clara adjusted the old woman's pulse monitor. "She found me." Serafina looked toward the windows. Morning light made her look smaller, more human. "That child is the only innocent thing left in this house." "Then why invite Isabella into it?" Serafina's hand tightened on the sheet. Clara noticed. Nurses noticed everything. The twitch before pain. The breath before a lie. The silence before confession. "Mrs. Salvatore, do not ask questions you cannot survive. I already work here." Serafina laughed once. Bitterly. "You are either foolish or extraordinary. I'm usually tired." For the first time, Serafina almost smiled. Then her face collapsed with sudden pain. Clara moved quickly. Heart rate rising. Skin clammy. Pupils uneven. "This isn't right," Clara said. She checked the medication box. The seal on the cardiac vial was wrong. Not broken. Replaced. A chill moved through her. Someone had switched Serafina's medication. Clara hit the emergency button, then pulled the vial into her pocket before the room filled with guards. Nico arrived in less than a minute. "What happened?" "Adverse reaction. I need a full tox screen." "Now." His eyes narrowed. "Poison. I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." Serafina grabbed Clara's wrist with surprising strength. "Not here," the old woman whispered. "Walls, listen." Nico heard. His expression turned to stone. Within 10 minutes, Clara, Serafina, Nico, Lucia, and 6 armed men were in black SUVs heading through the storm toward a private safe house on the coast. Forced proximity stopped being a romance trope and became a locked reality. The safe house sat on a cliff above the Atlantic. All steel windows, gray stone, and waves breaking below like bones. Clara was given the medical room. Serafina was placed under constant care. Lucia slept in the room across from Clara's cell, watched by 2 guards. Nico took the office and did not sleep for 36 hours. Clara worked until her hands cramped. The tests confirmed it. A slow poison disguised through medication interactions. Not enough to kill quickly, enough to weaken, confuse, and make Serafina appear naturally deteriorating. Someone wanted her alive long enough to sign documents, then dead before she could regret it. Nico read the results without blinking. Clara stood across from him in the office, while Dawn grayed the windows. "Who benefits?" she asked. "My fiancé." The words sounded dead in his mouth. "You knew I suspected. And you brought me into your house anyway," his eyes lifted. "I brought you in because every nurse before you was bought, frightened, or careless." Clara stared at him. "So I was a test. You were a risk. That's not better." "No," he said. "It isn't." Her hurt surprised her with its force. She had known better than to romanticize him. Known better than to mistake attention for tenderness. Still, some foolish part of her had believed the moments between them were untouched by strategy. The coffee in the library, the warning in the hall, the way he watched her with Lucia. A risk. That was all. Clara turned to leave. Nico's voice stopped her. "I chose you at dinner because my mother was cruel." She did not turn around. "And because Isabella hated it," Clara said. "Yes. At least he did not lie." Clara gripped the doorknob. "Thank you for your honesty, Mr. Salvatore." His silence sharpened. She had not called him that since the dinner. "Clara." "No." She turned back, eyes burning. "You don't get to say my name like it belongs somewhere in your mouth when you admit you used me as bait." His face changed. "Just slightly. Enough. I will protect you. You endangered me first." "Yes." The answer broke something. Not because it was cruel, because it was true. Clara left him standing in the gray light, powerful and alone. For 2 days, she spoke to him only about medical care. Nico did not apologize again. Men like him did not know how to kneel with words. Instead, he made sure Clara's brother was moved to a safer dorm under an anonymous scholarship. He had her apartment repaired, her rent paid 6 months ahead, and her broken front door replaced with steel. Clara found out and stormed into his office. "You paid my rent." Nico looked up from a stack of documents. "Yes. You had no right. I had every ability." "That is not the same thing." "No, it is the only thing that works in my world." "I don't live in your world." "You do now." The words landed too close to fear. Clara stepped toward his desk. "I am not yours to manage." Nico stood. "No," he said. "You are not." The admission should have satisfied her. It did not, because his eyes said something else. Something darker than possession because it was fighting itself. A phone rang on his desk. He answered. Listening. His expression emptied. Then he looked at Clara. "Isabella has called a press dinner tomorrow night. She intends to announce our wedding date." Clara felt something twist in her chest and hated herself for it. "Then announce it." Nico watched her carefully. "You want me to marry her. I want you to stop dragging me through your war. She poisoned my mother. Then expose her. I can tea, without knowing who helped her. So what do you need?" He came around the desk slowly. Clara should have moved. She did not. "I need Isabella angry enough to make a mistake." "No. You don't know what I'm asking." "Yes. I do." His eyes held hers. "I need you beside me at the press dinner." Clara laughed once, without humor. "As what, your nurse?" As the woman I trust. The room went silent. The words were not romantic. Not exactly. But from Nico Salvatore, they sounded more intimate than love. Clara's heart betrayed her. Beating hard. That's manipulation. Yes. At least pretend to be ashamed. I am. She searched his face and found no performance there. Only exhaustion. Anger. Need. Restraint pulled so tight it looked painful. If I do this, she said, it's for your mother and Lucia. Not for you. Nico nodded. And after that, you let me go. His jaw tightened. For the first time, he did not answer quickly. Clara's voice dropped. Nico. His name came out softer than she intended. His eyes flickered. Yes, he said finally. After that, I let you go. The press dinner was held in Manhattan. At a private club above Central Park, where the elevators required fingerprints and the waiters moved like ghosts. Clara wore a dark green dress Renata had left on her bed. It fit too well to be accidental. She almost refused to wear it. But her own clothes had disappeared for cleaning, and she did not have time to fight a mansion. When Nico saw her, he stopped mid-sentence. It lasted only a second, but Clara saw it. His gaze moved from her pinned hair to the curve of her waist to the nervous grip of her fingers around her small clutch. Then his eyes returned to her face, and everything in him locked back into control. You look uncomfortable, he said. I am good. Most beautiful things are dangerous when uncomfortable. Clara stared at him. That was almost a compliment. It was a warning. Do you flirt with everyone like a funeral director? No. Before she could respond, he offered his arm. She looked at it, then at him. This is pretend. His voice lowered. Then pretend well. Cameras flashed the moment they entered. The room turned. Isabella stood near the windows in white satin, surrounded by donors, politicians, and men who pretended their hands were clean. When she saw Clara on Nico's arm, her face did not change. Her eyes did. Nico guided Clara through the crowd with one hand resting lightly at her back. Not possessive enough to claim. Not distant enough to deny. Every inch of contact burned through the thin fabric of her dress. People whispered. Isabella approached with a champagne glass. Nico, she said sweetly. You brought the nurse. Nico's thumb pressed once against Clara's back. A warning, or reassurance. Clara could not tell. I brought Clara, he said. Isabella's smile glittered. How progressive of you. Clara met Hergaze. How predictable of you. A quiet shock moved through the nearby guests. Nico looked down at Clara. There it was again. That flash of fascination he tried to bury. Isabella leaned closer. Enjoy the borrowed dress. Miss Evans. Borrowed things must always be returned. Before Clara could answer, Nico took the champagne from Isabella's hand and set it on a passing tray. Careful, he said softly. Your jealousy is starting to look cheap. The smile fell from Isabella's face. A man approached then. Tall, blond, polished, with the cruel ease of old money. Lorenzo Greco. Clara knew his name from whispers around the mansion. A rival broker. A man who profited from wars he never fought himself. He kissed Isabella's cheek a little too close to her mouth. Nico saw. So did Clara. Lorenzo's eyes moved to Clara. This must be the famous nurse. Famous, Clara asked. In certain circles, Nico's hand stilled at her back. Lorenzo smiled. They say Nico chose you over his bride at dinner. Dangerous thing. Being chosen by a Salvatore. Women tend to mistake it for safety. Clara's blood cooled. Nico stepped forward. But Clara touched his sleeve. Just enough to stop him. The room seemed to notice. So did Nico. Clara looked at Lorenzo. And men tend to mistake cruelty for intelligence. But here we are. For one breath, Lorenzo's smile disappeared. Then cameras flashed again. Nico leaned close to Clara's ear. You keep surprising men who deserve worse. Her skin warmed. Don't sound proud, she whispered. I'm trying not to. The evening shattered at 10:43 p.m. A waiter dropped a tray. A woman screamed. A red dot appeared on Clara's chest. Nico moved before Clara understood. He slammed her behind a marble column as glass exploded from the window. Gunfire cracked through the room. Guests dove under tables. Bodyguards drew weapons. Chandeliers trembled above them. Nico covered Clara with his body. One arm braced beside her head, his face inches from hers. Are you hit? She shook her head. Breath gone. His hand moved over her shoulder, her waist, checking for blood with controlled urgency. Clara, answer me. I'm not hit. His eyes closed for half a second. Relief. Real enough to hurt. Another shot tore into the column. Nico turned. Fired twice without looking afraid. Then dragged Clara toward the service corridor. Behind them, Isabella was screaming Nico's name. He did not go to her. He kept Clara pressed against his side and moved like the building belonged to him. Like danger was just another language. He spoke better than everyone else. In the kitchen hallway, Clara stumbled. Nico caught her, his hand closing around her hip. For one suspended second. They were too close. Smoke in the air. Sirens below. His breath against her cheek. Her fingers gripping his shirt. Why didn't you go to Isabella? Clara whispered. His eyes burned into hers. Because the bullet was aimed at you? That was the moment Clara understood. She was no longer bait. She was the target. And Nico was terrified. Not loudly. Not gently. Terrified like a man who would burn cities before admitting his hands shook. He lifted her into a black SUV waiting in the alley. Rain poured over both of them. His men surrounded the vehicle with weapons drawn. Cameras flashed from the street beyond. By midnight, the entire city had seen the image. Nico Salvatore carrying the plain nurse through the rain, while his fiancée stood behind him in shattered glass. The scandal became a wildfire. By morning, every gossip site in New York had a headline. Mafia heir chooses nurse over bride during assassination attempt. Clara stared at the screen in the safe house kitchen. Exhausted and numb, Nico entered behind her. Don't read it. You made me famous by almost getting me killed. I didn't shoot at you. No. You just made sure everyone knew hurting me would hurt you. His silence confirmed it. Clara turned. You did this on purpose. I did not order the shot, but you wanted them to believe I mattered. Nico's voice went quiet. You do. The words were too simple. Too late. Too dangerous. Clara shook her head. Dawn, too. He stepped closer. She stepped back. Pain moved across his face so quickly she almost missed it. I am trying, he said, to stay away from you. Try harder. I have. The room changed again, filling with all the things they had not said. The almost touches. The locked doors. The way he watched her walk into rooms as if counting every threat before she saw one. The way she listened for his footsteps at night. Clara's voice trembled. You used me. Yes. You scared me. Yes. You protected me. Yes. I don't know which one matters more. Nico looked at her as if the answer might ruin him. Neither do I. Renata interrupted, before either of them could move. Mr. Salvatore. Mrs. Salvatore is awake. She wants Miss Evans. Serafina looked smaller in the medical bed. Oxygen at her nose. Stormlight on her silver hair. Clara, sat beside her. For a long moment, the old woman only watched her. Then she said, "I owe you an apology." Clara did not answer. Serafina's eyes filled, though no tears fell. Pride held them back like prison bars. "I called you too plain for our family because I wanted you to hate us enough to leave." Clara stilled. Nico's father loved a woman this family considered plain. Serafina continued. A school teacher. Quiet. Good. He kept her hidden for 2 years because he believed he could protect both his empire and her heart. Her voice weakened. He failed at both. She was murdered in a car meant for him. Nico stood in the doorway, his face unreadable. Serafina looked at her son, then back at Clara. When I saw him look at you, I saw his father making the same mistake. I thought cruelty might save you. Clara's throat tightened. That doesn't excuse it. No, Serafina said. It condemns me. For the first time, Clara saw the mother beneath the matriarch. Not kind, not innocent, but afraid. Serafina reached beneath her pillow with trembling fingers and pulled out a small key. Isabella has been asking me to sign the inheritance transfer for weeks. If Nico marries her before my death, the Caruso family gains voting power in 3 Salvatore companies. I refused. Then I became ill. Clara took the key. What does this open? Serafina's gaze moved to Nico. The chapel vault. Nico went still. Serafina whispered. Your father kept records there. Alliance. Blood debts. The name of the person inside this family who let the Grecos murder Lucia's parents. The room went silent. Lucia's parents. The ambush. The poison. The engagement. All of it connected. Nico took one step inside. Serafina closed her eyes. I was too afraid to know. That night, Clara and Nico entered the abandoned chapel behind the mansion. Rain tapped against stained glass. Candles had not been lit there in years. Dust covered the pews. The air smelled of stone, wax, and old grief. The vault was hidden beneath the altar. Nico unlocked it with Serafina's key while Clara held the flashlight. Inside were ledgers, photographs, sealed envelopes, and one small velvet box. Nico reached for the envelope marked with his father's handwriting. Before he could open it, Clara saw something move in the shadows. Nico. The first shot hit the stone behind him. Nico shoved Clara down behind the altar. Men poured into the chapel from the side doors. Not his men. Greco men. The chapel erupted. Gunfire cracked through sacred silence. Stained glass shattered in blue and red shards. Nico fired back with cold precision. But there were too many of them. Clara crawled toward the fallen envelope. Hard hammering, while bullets tore through wood above her. A hand grabbed her hair. She cried out. Nico turned. That second cost him. A man struck him from behind, and Nico dropped to one knee. Clara was dragged backward into the aisle. Lorenzo Greco stepped from the darkness, holding a gun like it bored him. Touching, he said. The devil and his nurse. Praying at last. Nico rose slowly. Blood at his temple. His eyes were not human. Let her go. Lorenzo smiled. You keep saying that about things you have no power to release. Clara fought the man holding her. His grip tightened. Lorenzo lifted the envelope from the floor. Your father was sentimental. He documented betrayal as if truth matters when everyone with a gun lies. Nico's voice was deadly calm. You killed my cousin. No. Isabella gave us the route. Someone closer opened the gate. The chapel doors opened again. Isabella entered in a white coat, untouched by rain. Behind her stood one of Nico's oldest captains, Marco Bellini, Nico's godfather, in everything but blood. For the first time, Nico looked truly wounded. Not by the blood on his face, by the man beside Isabella. Marco. Marco would not meet his eyes. Isabella walked down the aisle slowly. You were supposed to marry me. Nico. You were supposed to secure the families. Keep your mother quiet. And let grief make you obedient. Nico stared at her. You poisoned my mother. I softened her. Clara's stomach turned. You tried to kill a child, Clara said. Isabella looked at her like she had forgotten Clara was there. Children are only valuable when they inherit something. Nico moved. Lorenzo pressed the gun to Clara's head. Another step, he said. And she dies plain. The word hit the air. Plain. Too plain for our family. Too ordinary. Too soft. Clara felt fear rise. Cold and sharp. Then she saw Nico's face. He was looking at her as if the whole world had narrowed down to the space between her breath and the trigger. He lowered his gun. Every man in the chapel seemed to exhale. Nico, Clara whispered. His eyes stayed on hers. I told you, he said quietly. I would protect you. Lorenzo laughed. By surrendering, Nico's gaze did not move. By choosing. He dropped his gun. Isabella smiled. Clara understood too late. Nico had chosen her again. Not as bait. Not as strategy. As weakness. As truth. As the one thing they could use to bring him to his knees. Lorenzo ordered his men forward. Then Lucia's small voice came from the balcony above. Uncle Nico. Everyone looked up. The child stood beside Renata. Terrified. Clutching her rabbit. It was only a second. But 1 second was enough. Clara drove her heel into the foot of the man holding her. Twisted free. And slammed her elbow into his throat. Nico moved at the same instant. His hidden blade flashed from his sleeve. Marco reached for his gun. But Renata fired first from the balcony. Chaos exploded. Nico reached Clara through smoke and screaming. A bullet grazed his shoulder as he pulled her behind him. This time she saw the blood. Nico, fine. You are not fine. He almost smiled. You always argue at terrible moments. Lorenzo tried to run. Nico caught him at the chapel doors and drove him into the stone wall with a force that made dust fall from the ceiling. For a terrible second, Clara saw what Nico was capable of. Not rumor. Not atmosphere. Truth. His hand closed around Lorenzo's throat. Isabella screamed for him to stop. But not from mercy. From fear that Lorenzo would speak. Nico pressed harder. Give me one reason, he said. Lorenzo choked out. The child, Isabella's son. The chapel went still. Isabella's face drained of color. Nico turned his head slowly. What son? Marco closed his eyes. Lorenzo smiled through blood at his mouth. Hers and mine. Hidden in Boston. She needed your name before anyone discovered she carried Greco blood into a Caruso marriage contract. The betrayal landed like thunder. Isabella had not only poisoned Serafina, she had planned to marry Nico while hiding a child with his enemy. Using the Salvatore Empire to protect Greco blood and erase Lucia's claim, Nico released Lorenzo and turned toward Isabella. She backed away. Nico, she whispered, you know why I did it. This world rewards men for worse. No, he said. This world buries women and calls it business. I have buried enough. His gun rose. Clara stepped in front of him. Not because Isabella deserved mercy, because Nico deserved not to lose the last piece of himself in that chapel. Nico. His eyes flicked to Clara. Wild with grief and rage. Move. No. She tried to kill my mother. I know. She would have killed Lucia. I know. She put a gun to your head through his hand. Clara moved closer. Slow. Careful. until she stood between him and the woman who had destroyed his family. And if you kill her like this, Clara whispered, she gets to make you into exactly what she said you were. His chest rose and fell. The gun remained raised. Clara reached for his wrist. This time, he did not pull away. His skin was hot. His pulse, brutal. You chose me, she said softly. Choose yourself too. The fight left his eyes in pieces. He lowered the gun. His men took Isabella, Lorenzo, and Marco alive. Dawn. The chapel was surrounded by black SUVs and federal vehicles that arrived because Nico had sent evidence anonymously before entering the vault. Clara understood then that he had planned for betrayal, but not for her to be caught inside it. That was the part that broke him. At sunrise, Nico collapsed. Blood loss. Clara told herself professionally. Shock. She told herself clinically. Fear. Her heart whispered. She rode with him in the ambulance to a private hospital where no one asked questions. She held pressure to his shoulder and ordered him to stay awake. His eyes found hers beneath the harsh white lights. You were angry. I am furious. Good. Stop saying that. I like you alive enough to hate me. Her hands trembled. He noticed. Even half-conscious. He noticed. Clara, he whispered. What if I die? You are not dying. If I die, he continued. Stubborn, even bleeding. Lucia's documents are in the black safe. Renata knows. Your brother's tuition is paid through graduation. Your apartment is yours. No one will touch you. Tears blurred her vision. You arrogant. Controlling. Impossible man. His mouth curved faintly. You forgot criminal. I'm adding it to the list. His eyes softened in a way that frightened her more than bullets. I didn't know how to want you without making you a target. Clara pressed harder against the wound. Voice breaking. Then learn. He watched her like those words hurt more than the bullet. Stay, he whispered. The ambulance doors opened. Doctors rushed in. Clara was pulled away. For 6 hours, she waited outside surgery, with Lucia asleep in her lap and Serafina beside her in a wheelchair. The old woman did not speak for a long time. Then she reached across the space between them and touched Clara's hand. I was wrong, Serafina said. Clara looked at her. Serafina's eyes were vet now, pride finally defeated by fear. You were not too plain for our family. You were too good for what we had become. Clara swallowed. I don't know if that makes this better. It doesn't, Serafina said. But perhaps it can make us begin again. Nico survived. Of course he did. Men like him seemed built to make death wait outside the door until they finished giving orders. When Clara entered his hospital room the next morning, he was awake, pale, furious, and attached to monitors he clearly resented. You intimidated 2 nurses, she said. They tried to sedate me. You needed sedation. I needed information. You needed humility. His eyes moved over her face, lingering on the shadows beneath her eyes. You didn't sleep. Neither did your mother. Lucia with Renata. Safe. His body eased at that. Clara adjusted his IV with practiced hands, trying not to look at the bandage across his shoulder. The bruising along his ribs. The vulnerability of him in a hospital bed. Nico watched her. You're leaving, he said. Her hands stilled. It was not a question. The room felt suddenly too quiet. I should. Yes. The answer hurt more because he agreed. Clara looked at him. You said you'd let me go. I did. And will you? His jaw tightened. For a moment, she saw the war inside him. The old Nico would have locked every door, bought every building around her, placed men in every shadow, and called it love. This Nico looked at her like letting her leave might kill him, then said, "Yes." Clara's throat tightened. "Why? Because you mattered before I noticed you?" Her own words returned to her, but in his mouth they became something sacred. Nico continued, voice rougher now. "Because if I make your world smaller so mine feels safer, I become another man you survive instead of someone you choose." The monitors beeped steadily. Clara looked away before he could see everything breaking open in her face. "And if I don't know what I choose yet, then I wait." She laughed softly. Painfully. "You don't wait. I'm learning." A silence passed between them. Then Nico reached toward her, but stopped before touching her hand. Always restraint. Always almost. This time, Clara closed the distance. She placed her fingers in his. His grip tightened like a confession. Not gentle. Careful. There was a difference. 3 weeks later, the Salvatore mansion held another family dinner. The same chandeliers. The same long table. The same rain sliding down the windows. But this time, Isabella's chair was empty. Marco's seat was empty. Several men who had laughed at Clara were gone, replaced by quieter ones with eyes that understood survival. Serafina sat at the head of the table, thinner but alive. Lucia sat beside her, swinging her feet, her stuffed rabbit tucked under one arm. Clara entered wearing her own dress. Simple, blue, bought with her own money. No borrowed silk. No armor. Conversation stopped. Some guests looked startled to see her. Others looked afraid to react incorrectly. Nico stood at the far end of the room in a black suit, his shoulder still healing. His eyes fixed on Clara like the rest of the world had become background noise. Beside his chair was the place traditionally reserved for his future wife. Empty. Clara's pulse quickened. Serafina rose slowly with the help of her cane. Every person at the table stood with her. The old woman looked directly at Clara. "Miss Evans," she said, her voice carrying through the candlelit room. "The last time you stood in this dining room, I used this table to humiliate you." Clara did not move. Serafina's hand trembled on the cane, but her chin stayed high. "I said you were too plain for our family. I said you did not belong in our world. I was cruel because I was afraid, and proud because pride was easier than apology." She paused. Nico watched silently. Serafina continued. "Tonight, in front of my family, I say this clearly. You saved my life. You saved my son from becoming his worst grief. You protected Lucia when blood could not. And if this family is ever worthy of you, it will be because we learned how to become better in your presence." No one breathed. Then Serafina lowered her head. The matriarch of the Salvatore family bowed to the nurse she had insulted. Clara's eyes burned. She whispered, "Thank you." Nico moved then. He walked toward Clara just as he had that first night, past the empty chair, past the staring family, past every rule his world had written for him. He stopped in front of her. "I promise to let you go," he said quietly. Clara looked up at him. "You did. I kept that promise." "Yes." His eyes held hers, dark and steady. "Now I am asking you to stay." The room disappeared. Clara heard only the rain, her own heartbeat, his breath. "As your nurse," she asked. "No. As your weakness." His jaw flexed. "As my choice." The word moved through her like light through stained glass. Choice. Not bait. Not protection. Not strategy. Choice. Nico reached into his jacket and removed a small velvet box. For one wild second, Clara thought it was a ring. It was not. Inside lay a key. Brass. Old. Worn smooth. The chapel. he said. The vault is gone. The records are with people who can do something useful with them. I'm turning the chapel into a schoolroom for Lucia and the children of the families we've buried. Clara stared at the key. Nico's voice lowered. You told me survival wasn't enough. I listened. Her tears fell then. She hated crying in front of rich people. But somehow, in that room, she no longer felt poor. She felt seen. Nico took one step closer. I will always be dangerous, he said. I won't insult you by pretending otherwise. I have enemies. Blood on my name. Sins I cannot polish into romance. Clara whispered. I know, but I will never again use your heart as bait. I will never make your life smaller and call it protection. And if you choose to walk away tomorrow, I will hate every second of it and still open the door. The honesty broke her more than any perfect promise could have. Clara looked at the key, then at Lucia, watching with hopeful eyes, at Serafina, proud and humbled, at the empty chair where Isabella had once smiled like a knife. Finally, Clara looked at Nico. I'm not playing, she said. His eyes softened. No, he said. You never were. I'm not easy. I noticed. I'm not going to become decoration in your world. I would be disappointed if you did. And if your family insults my shoes again, I am billing you for emotional damages. A sound moved through the room. Almost laughter. Nico's mouth curved. A real smile this time. Small. Rare. Devastating. Send the invoice to me personally. Clara took the key. Then she placed her free hand in his. The family watched as Nico Salvatore, the most feared man in New York, lowered his head and kissed the hand of the ordinary nurse he had chosen first. Not because she belonged to his world, because he wanted to build one worthy of her. Months later, the abandoned chapel no longer smelled of dust and gunfire. Morning sun poured through repaired stained glass. Lucia sat at a small desk, drawing flowers in the margins of her lesson book. Children laughed in the garden outside, guarded from a distance by men who had once only known how to hold weapons. Serafina visited twice a week, pretending not to cry whenever Lucia read aloud. Clara still worked as a nurse, but not because she needed the money. Because healing was the one thing the Salvatore name had never learned how to do properly. Nico would stand outside the chapel sometimes, watching her teach Lucia how to wrap a bandage or pronounce difficult words, his face unreadable to everyone else. But Clara knew him now. She knew the slight shift in his eyes when he was afraid, the silence when he was overwhelmed, the way his hand hovered near her back in crowded rooms, still asking permission, even when every instinct in him demanded possession. One evening, Rain returned to the mansion. Clara found Nico alone in the chapel, seated in the back row where shadows softened the sharpness of him. You were hiding, she said. I own the house. That wasn't a denial. He looked at her, and the years of violence in his face seemed quieter. Clara sat beside him. For a while, neither spoke. Outside, rain tapped the stained glass. Inside, candlelight moved gently over the repaired altar. Nico reached for her hand. This time, he did not stop halfway. Clara let him take it. I chose you first that night, he said. She looked at him. No, you chose against them. His thumb moved over her knuckles. Yes. The honesty made her smile. When did you choose me? Nico stared toward the altar, thinking like the answer mattered. When you told my mother you weren't waiting for her to die, he said. When you held Lucia like the house wasn't full of monsters. When you looked at the worst thing in me and asked me to choose myself too. He turned to her. But I think I loved you in the ambulance. When you were furious and saving my life at the same time. Clara's breath caught. Nico Salvatore did not say love like a poem. He said it like surrender. Clara leaned closer. That's a terrible time to fall in love. I'm a terrible man. No, she whispered. You re a dangerous man trying not to be cruel. His eyes closed briefly. When he opened them, there was devotion there. Dark, earned, terrifying in its depth. Clara, yes, if I ask you to marry me one day, it won't be in front of my family. It won't be because of an inheritance, a war, or a chair at a table. Her heart began to pound. It will be somewhere quiet, he said. Somewhere you can say no without anyone watching. Clara smiled through sudden tears. And if I say yes, Nico lifted her hand to his mouth, then I spend the rest of my life proving I deserved it. The chapel doors opened behind them. Lucia peeked inside. Are you two being dramatic again? Clara laughed, wiping her eyes. Nico. She hid. Constantly. Apparently. Lucia ran down the aisle and climbed between them, forcing Nico to make room. He did. Awkwardly. Gently. As if love still surprised him every time it asked for space. Clara looked at them, both beneath the colored light. The mafia boss. The hidden child. The ordinary nurse who had walked into a mansion to do a job and found a family buried beneath fear. Outside, black SUVs waited in the rain. Enemies still existed. The Salvatore name still carried shadows. But inside the chapel, Nico held Clara's hand openly while Lucia leaned against his side. And for once, no one in the world was being used as bait. No one was being chosen as strategy. No one was being told they were too plain to belong. Nico looked at Clara over Lucia's head. His voice was low enough that only she heard it. You were the first honest thing this house ever feared. Clara squeezed his hand. And you were the first dangerous thing I ever trusted. The rain softened. The candles burned steady. And in a world built on bloodlines, power, and beautiful lies, the most feared man in New York sat in the back of a restored chapel, holding the hand of the woman his family once mocked as if choosing her first had saved him last.